Hey, my name is Kirt Meyer, and we're at Meyer Orchards in Talent. It's a pear farm that my parents have owned in the same location since 1954. The story of the day is that after all this time we've been in business, because of the drought and just because of the economic nature of the pear business, we decided this was a good time to get out. We don't have a crop this year. We probably won't have water next year either. We have them out with chainsaws just cutting the trees down.
So seeing it all get cut down, how does that make you feel?
Oh yeah, it's crushing. It really is.
A new dimension in sound. This is love. As the record plays, love.
Hi there folks, I'm Keegan Van Hook and this is Us As We Are. Today we're here at Meyer Orchards where we're going to talk to the owner of this orchard, Kirt Meyer, about how he is handling the drought that has hit Southern Oregon and the West at large. Come on, let's go find him. All right, sir, how about you introduce yourself and just tell us where we are today?
Okay, my name is Kirt Meyer, and we're at Meyer Orchards in Talent. It's a pear farm that my parents have owned in the same location since 1954. The story of the day is that after all this time we've been in business, because of the drought and just because of the economic nature of the pear business, we decided this was a good time to get out. We don't have a crop this year. We probably won't have water next year either. And because of the water situation, the trees will not set buds. So even if we have ample water next year, the crop won't be good. So it's just a good time to get out.
Get out as in you're gonna cut farming and not be in the pear farming business anymore?
Yeah, that's correct. My great-grandfather started in 1910. Back then we were over on South Stage Road in Medford. And then my parents have been here since 1954. And we've been running this as a family farm up until this year.
So obviously the drought is kind of the reason why what's happening now is happening. But you mentioned that the pear business hasn't been profitable for a long time. Could you kind of talk about why that is?
Well, it's just overproduction, mainly from foreign imports, foreign competition. Because they grow a lot of pears in other countries like Chile, and they do it much cheaper than we can. And so it's not the thriving business it used to be, like back in the 80s, because we had less foreign competition back then, and pears was actually one of the three major industries for many years, up until about the late 80s. It was timber, medical, and pear. And now most of the pear orchards are going out of business. When my great-grandfather started in 1910, there was over 400 pear growers in the Rogue Valley. And a few years ago, I don't know how many there is now, but there was less than 10 a few years ago. And so now it's probably just going to be mainly Nomis and Bear Creek.
So gee whiz. So pears, do you think that there's going to be a lasting pear presence in the Rogue Valley? Because, I mean, pears are a huge thing out here. Like, there's the Pear Blossom Parade, Pear Blossom Park. There's a lot of stuff oriented around pears. Is that going to be, in the future, not as much a factor of life here?
Well, if the water situation stays the way it is, no. The pears won't survive. The only pears that might be left in the valley would be places like Grants Pass, where they get a lot of water from the Rogue River. But here, right here in the heart of the Rogue Valley, I think the pear industry will eventually go away within the next year or two. You know, I know that this valley is known for the pear industry and has been for many years. And I know it's going to come quite a shock to a lot of people when more and more orchards start coming out, and it's just really boils down to it doesn't make economic sense to move on. I mean, it is a business, and if you're not making any money doing what you do, or being able to at least stay in business, then it doesn't make any sense to go on, because in any kind of farming, whether it be pear or what have you, you basically have to invest your life savings, or a good part of it, into a crop, and then hopefully your yields be enough where you'll get it back, and hopefully a little bit more. And so that's just the nature of farming.
So what are you doing today? I see that there's a lot of stumps out there in the orchard. What's kind of the process of getting out of this business?
Well, what we're doing right now is we have our labor here that we do the H2A program from Mexico, and when you do that, you're committed to have them for a certain amount of time. And so right now we're done harvesting. We did harvest some Bartlett's and some Camise, which, they were light crops. We're not going to have any red angelos, not going to have any bosque. So instead of harvesting those varieties, we have them out with chainsaws just cutting the trees down, and biomass is going to come and they're going to chip up all the wood. And then when we get our first rain, if and when it comes, then we will take an excavator and take the stumps out, and then we'll have to deal with the roots, probably just burn them.
And after that's done, can this land be used for something else, other types of farming? Could it become an orchard again in the future if sort of the economic and environmental factors change, or is it going to be sort of barren? Because there are probably a lot of roots under there.
There are a lot of roots under there, and you could definitely put a different kind of crop in there, because the irrigation system will still be in there. I mean, some of it might get damaged during the, taking the stumps out and the grinding up the lumber, but it'll still have the infrastructure there, and it could be used for other types of farming. I'm not sure exactly what, because like I said before, if the water situation continues, there won't be any farming.
So my last major question is, what are you going to do after pear farming?
Me personally?
Yeah, and your family, I suppose.
My family? Well, we'll just have to move on and just see what the next chapter of life brings us. I'm actually a realtor, and so I have another source of income. But some of these others, people that come, seasonally and depend on work, they'll have to go elsewhere, possibly other parts of the country, to get work. Especially if you're in the farming business, because the farming industry has definitely taken a major decline this year, especially because of the water.
Yes, I mean, Talent and this whole region has kind of been battered recently. It was the fire, and now we're having the drought. How does this all kind of make you feel? How are you coping with it?
Well, it's sad. I mean, I'm actually the fourth generation, so it's a shock when you've been in business all this time, since 1910, and then all of a sudden it just comes to an end, it seems like, in a day. So yeah, it's quite a shock. It's it's a sentimental thing. It's been in my family for so long, and it does hurt emotionally, but it's just it just doesn't make any sense to move on anymore.
Can you show us around the farm a little bit?
Sure.
See what there is to see?
Yeah. Basically, as soon as the pears are harvested, we don't have any harvesting to show right now, but they get put in bins. These are wood bins here, but we also have plastic bins. So the Bartlett's, for example, they went to the cannery this year because we didn't have the size, and so it didn't make sense to pack them and size them and all that. So they get put in bins and they get shipped off to either be packed or to the cannery. And so those bins are Del Monte bins, so those go directly to the cannery. And we have our own bins over here, which are the plastic ones. So those are the ones we use when we harvesting the fruit that will be later be packed. So we'll ship them to the packing house, and then they get packed and then sold and then shipped away. And most of our produce, back when we had our own packing shed, which was about 20 years ago, we had our own label, and we would do all that here. We had our own packing equipment. Trucks would come here, and we would load here. And majority of the fruit would go to New York, to the East Coast. And probably 2/3 to 3/4 of it, because they have, with their climate, they have a hot, humid climate in the east, and they just get overwhelmed with blight, so they can't grow pears there. Right. And even though it's dry here, even sometimes we have challenging blight years. This year hasn't been any because we've had no water. So,
And what do you mean by blight?
oh, blight is a disease that pears get. They actually call it fire blight because when a tree has blight, it actually looks like somebody took a torch and torched the branches, and they just get black. And it grows into the tree. It'll spread into the tree, and if it gets into the root, it'll actually kill the tree.
Gotcha.
So it's something you have to always be on top of when you're out spraying or working in the orchards, just being aware of it. Then you have a crew go in and just cut it past where it's infected and hopefully catch it before it kills the trees. So that was ongoing, especially right around June, up until about harvest, which is about harvest usually starts around the first or second week of August. We have a variety called the Best Ever, which is the only ones in existence. It's our own variety. A family friend used to farm them, and we're the ones that actually had the first acreage of them and actually started to market them. And they are a cross between a Camise and a Louis Pasteur, which is the inventor of pasteurized milk. He invented the pasteurization of milk. Louis Pasteur. He had his own class of pear, and so it's a combination of those two pears. And what's remarkable about it is a Camise-like pear, which I don't know how many people are familiar with the Camise pear, but it's usually the one you find in the gift pack, like Harry and David uses. They're really, really good pear. It's like that. It's got a little bit more fibrous texture to it, but the flavor is real similar. But they have an amazing shelf life. They'll last 6-8 months in storage. Yeah, and that's common storage too, not controlled atmosphere storage.
Yeah, so Harry and David, I think a lot of people around the country probably know of Harry and David. Do you guys sell product to Harry and David?
We do. We sell the Camise pears to Harry and David.
Cool.
So those are the wind machines that I was telling you about that we use during frost season. It's basically just a huge diesel engine that turns that propeller 2,500 RPMs, and it's like a helicopter. It creates wind, and that's what keeps the cold air from settling and the heat from rising. That's why they're so tall.
Yeah.
It basically mixes the hot and cold air together, and that's what raises the temperature. And it's usually enough to save the crop.
Well, so for clarification, that isn't a wind turbine, that isn't a power generation turbine. That actually is being powered, and that creates wind.
Yeah, it's just a giant fan. That's all it is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I rolled up, I assumed that was a power generation thing, but
no, it's a diesel. It's got a diesel engine. It's got a 300-gallon tank, and then when it runs at full speed, it's 2,500 RPMs. It's spinning that propeller, which weighs 300 pounds, 2,500 times a minute. And it puts out pretty good wind. Each wind machine will cover about 5 acres.
What does creating all that wind do?
When heat rises, cold air settles, right? It takes that heat and it mixes it with the cold air, and it raises the temperature. So the cold air, it just basically keeps the cold air from settling, and it'll bring the heat down, and then that's how it raises the temperature. It mixes the hot and cold together. This orchard here is some of the Camise pears that I was telling you about. This one, again, was on the upper canal, so it didn't have the water. So these have actually already been harvested. We just left on the small fruit. We didn't bother with it because, there's not worth. It's actually worth less to us if it gets picked and processed and trucked. It's actually an expense. So it's better to leave the fruit on the trees that you can't use. Like for juice, for example. Juice pears are worth about $60 a ton, and it costs us almost $70 a ton to pick them. So you're better just leaving them on the trees.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just the economics of it. I mean, it is waste, and it is unfortunate, but if it doesn't make economic sense, there's no point in doing things like that.
So we're going to see these. What do you call these again?
Yeah, these are called smudge pots. And when I was a kid, it was called smudging. And so back in the 80s, when there was a lot more of them around, the kids would come with these little torches, They're filled with like gasoline, and it's a mixture of gasoline and diesel, and they light the wick on top. And what they do is open this lid here, and this is a 10-gallon drum of diesel. And then they open the stack, and then they would light it. It would actually drip as you poured the fuel into it, and with the liquid, it would actually drip little fireballs in there, and that's what would light the pot. And then once it got going nice and hot, then you shut this damper, and you can adjust the holes. There's 1 hole, 2 hole, 3 hole, depending on how cold it is. And then what we usually do is we start at 1 hole, let it run for a while, and then we'll go down to like a half. And if it's maintaining the temperature, to save fuel. Because of course, the more open you have it, the faster your fuel goes out. And these will burn about 1 gallon an hour. So it'll last about, we don't have them 100% full, so they'll last 8 to 10 hours if they're reasonably full.
And you put these out in the field again to try and keep the temperature up during periods of time when it's too cold? Yeah,
we do. A lot of orchards will leave them out in the fields. Maybe folks have seen them scattered out there all the time, and what they'll do is some orchards will take plastic and wrap around here, because if you leave them out, irrigation water will actually get in there and it'll get into the fuel, and so you don't want that. So, but what we do is we actually physically take them out. We actually put them in every spring, and then when frost season's over, we actually take them out and just put them on the borders of the property. See, back in the 70s, ag diesel was very cheap. It was only like 11 cents a gallon or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so,
what does it cost now?
Now it's over $3.
Wow, that is a huge change.
For ag diesel. And so you imagine 2,500 gallons an hour, what that would cost you over in one night.
So you're kind of working with really huge amounts of money, but the margins are very, very small.
Exactly. I mean, and it's an upfront investment. You have to invest money in a crop. You got to nurture it. I mean, any number of things can happen. You could have hail that would damage your crop, which we've already discussed. Juice fruit isn't worth anything. It's just a way of getting rid of your junk, basically. You could have, like this year, it was water. Water situation. You could have a major frost. I mean, there's any number of things that can happen where that crop could get destroyed after all that investment, time, money, and energy you put into a crop. So that's why farming is so difficult, and it's a very hard way to make a living.
So I think a lot of people in your position are probably experiencing similar things with their farms. Do you think that there's going to be like a big increase in fruit prices because of what's going on right now?
Oh, definitely. Almonds too. Northern California took out acres and acres and acres of almond orchards because they don't have the water. I mean, their water situation in Northern California has been worse than here for many years prior. And so, fruit's going to be expensive. Almonds, any kind of nut's going to be expensive, just like anything else. And then the labor situation too is one of the challenges in farming, because it's seasonal. You have to find people to work from, the first part of August till October, 2 months out of the year.
That's it.
And that's it. It's not full time. So many people just move on, or they find other jobs, or and it's physically demanding work. A lot of people don't want to do it. So,
who do you usually hire to do that kind of work?
For the harvesting, it's been it's called the H2A program, where you actually have to. There's a lot of paperwork involved, and we have an agency that helps us, facilitate that. But it's basically agreement with the government. You have to go through Homeland Security. People have to be screened. They brought up legally on visas, work visas. And they come and they leave. There's a date, start date, end date, and they have to be out. They got to be back home by that date.
So if they came from Mexico, they would then have to go back to Mexico by that date?
Yes, yes. And so, and it's very costly. We have to pay for their transportation to and from. We have to provide them with free housing, and then we have to take them to the grocery store and bank once a week. And plus there's there's OSHA standards for housing, and and so we have to do that process as well. Make sure have the water tested every year, make sure the water's potable every year, and so there's a lot that goes into it. And there's a minimum prevailing wage too, which this year it's $16.34 an hour.
Wow.
So that's the minimum that they could be paid. Most of them make quite a bit more than that when they're harvesting because they get paid by the bin.
Yeah.
This year we were paying $35 a bin, and there's guys out there who could pick 7-8 bins a day and make a lot more money than 16 an hour.
Yeah.
So, but and we do it again for pruning. So they'll come, from August till September for the harvesting, and then they'll come again pruning usually around the end of November or beginning of December, and then we will have them until about the first part of March. So we do that twice a year, to and from Mexico, housing and all that stuff. So it's very costly because the local labor market is pretty much non-existent right now. I know there's other businesses hurting too, other industries, but it's been like that for us for a long time. It's just got worse for us, and so everybody else is starting to understand, what we're going through right now. This is a little 10-horse pump here. This is our baby, and this only irrigates that field at 4 acres there at a time. And so, so the way it works is we have water rights to Anderson Creek, which is over there. And if you come over here, you can see, you can't really see it very well, but there's a ditch just on this side of the smudge plots there. So we have the rights to bore up Anderson Creek, and the water comes through here. There's a culvert underground. The water comes through and fills this up, and then water goes over the top of those boards, and that's what takes the water out and irrigates over there. It's underground sprinkler system there. And then once it goes past this, it goes down that other culvert that goes that way, and that's what fills up our pond over there, irrigation pond. In a 24-hour period, we're using about 1 million gallons of water. So, and when it's hot, we are basically, that'll do about 15 acres at a time.
Is that something that you can because I assume like the trees themselves probably don't drink like that many millions of gallons. Is there any way to kind of reclaim some of the water that just flows through and use it again, or
yeah,
once you use it, is it gone?
What we do is, there's drain fields in the orchard, and we don't irrigate to the point where we get runoff. We keep it pretty good, and they're actually pretty strict on that in the recent years. If they see you got runoff, they'll shut you off.
I see. Okay.
But the way our system is so those culvert system I was telling you about fills this pond. It actually comes down there and it goes across this road. That's what fills this pond. Okay. And then if the pond were ever to get overfilled, there's another culvert that's the outlet that goes into this cement ditch. And that water doesn't get wasted, it gets put into the lower canal so someone else can use it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we got a pretty good system as far as not having any water waste. We just have the regular sprinklers in the ground. That's the older system there where it's just PVC underground with the rainbirds. That system over there is a little bit more efficient because it has poly pipe underground. And I don't know if you can see that orange stake over there. It's got what they call the micro sprinklers right there by that tree.
Oh yeah, I see that.
There's one over there too. They put out a little bit less water and they kind of concentrate it more. But the best is the drip system. The only disadvantage of the drip system is like if you had grass in between the trees like we do. We used to have dirt where we would plow the fields after every irrigation, which it's a lot more work and it's just dirty, dusty, miserable work. And with the sod that we had planted in between the trees, we would just basically mow it and irrigate it. So it'd be like a park on a normal year. It'd just be like a lawn, and then you have your trees with we have a weed strip. We do herbicide strip there. And that keeps the weeds from growing up into the trees and into the sprinkler systems. But that seems to use less water than just dirt because it dries out quick when it keeps the moisture in, the sod keeps the moisture in, and it keeps it from having to irrigate as often. And it's nicer to work, you just mow it, you don't have to, because before we had discs, constantly plowing the dirt and dust everywhere, and it was almost like a daily basis nonstop. But this way you're just mowing the field maybe 5 or 6 times a summer, and that's it. But it uses a lot of water. If you use a drip system, you would lose all that. You wouldn't have any grass growing in the middle. So there's advantage and disadvantage. It works well for other crops, drip systems like anything that's not a tree crop.
Are those guys over there, are they chopping down trees in your orchard?
Yes, they're right here.
Oh wow. Can we walk down there and have a look?
Down there.
Okay.
Consolidating them all in one row, like every 2 rows goes into the middle. And that way, when biomass comes, they can bring their machinery in and reduce the risk of damaging the sprinkler system. And then they're gonna push it to the grinder, and the grinder's got a giant arm, and they take a whole tree at a time and just drop it in there and it chips it out. I might have to get your number or something and have you guys come out when they start doing it. It's just, it's like amazing. Pretty straightforward. We're just cutting the lead. They're called leaders. There's the trunk, and the main branches are called the leaders. So most of them have 3.
Yeah.
And that's the way we train the trees, because a fruit tree wants to be spread, to let much light in as possible. Well, some orchards have a single leader tree, which works fine, but then they have to be planted closer together, because its trees are smaller.
So are these guys laborers you hired through the H2A program?
They are. Yes, they are. We've got 9 of them, so we have them until October 1st. They just started. You saw how much trees they took down, right?
Yeah, they're going really fast.
They just started yesterday. They took 1,000 trees out yesterday. Yep. We got 10,000 trees, so it shouldn't take. Of course, when they get to this orchard here, this is our oldest orchard. These trees are probably about 60 years old. And some of the leaders on these things are like that,
60 years old.
Yeah, approximately. Well, I know they're older than me, and I'm 52, so I'm guessing, because I remember being a little kid and seeing them, so they're probably close to 60. Yep.
So seeing it all get cut down, how does that make you feel?
Oh yeah, it's crushing. It really is. And so that's actually how my family ended up here, because they sold the pear orchard to get out of the pear business back in 1953. Then they came here and they started a vegetable farm. So it was mainly, it wasn't all vegetables. It was cantaloupe, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers. And then as years went by, I guess, the technology got better to save, they had the smudge pots and they had the wind machines, and the pear business was getting good again. And so then we got back into pears. Probably, I'm going to say probably in the 60s, I'm guessing, the mid 60s, we got back into the pear business. And then we branched off into peaches, and and the peaches ended up being, they're a lot more work actually, a lot more work, and there was less profit in them back then, because if you do them and you transport them to a different location, they got to be picked green, and they're not as good as a local peach. And so if we were to ship them to, say, Northern California or Southern California or someplace like that, their local peach is going to be much better than ours. And so we got out of the peach business, except for the local market, and we had 8 acres of them until 2017. We pulled out the last of them. Number one, because they were at the end of their lifespan. The peach tree lasts about 20 years, and we had planted them in 1998, so it was about time. Honestly, we could have gotten maybe a couple more years out of it, but with the labor situation, peach season is a 6-week cycle. You got to find somebody to work those 6 weeks every year, and it's really challenging. And so we got out of the peach business and all pear, and then and now we're getting out of the pear business again after 50 years later, or more than that, 70 years later, since the 50s.
Well, that being all said, do you think that there's ever a future where your family might get back into the pear business?
I don't think, well, my family won't get back into the pear business. I think the only pear business that will survive are the larger corporations like Bear Creek, Nomis. Bear Creek's success has been actually not in pears right now. I mean, it was, but they have their gift boxes, and they've marketed it, and they're doing other things with pears, and that's really what you have to do. You know, and we did quite well back in the 80s when we had our own packing shed, and we packed our own fruit, and we had our own label. But then eventually that started to decline, and then Bear Creek, for example, well, and Nomis too, they got into the things. They got their wine facility, and they started getting into wine a few years back. And so you have to do pears with something. You got to do gift boxes. You got to have, you know, Bear Creek's got their moose munch. You got to do something like that. You can't just make it only on pears. It's just a different market right now.
So what was this space used for?
This was, the pears would come in with a forklift, and then there would be a set of rollers that would set the bin of pears on. The bin of pears would go on the rollers, and then we'd have a worker. It's called a bin dumper. It's like a cage, and it holds the bin, and it has a little lid on it so you can open it up and let the pears out gently. It tips the whole bin up, and then the pears come out of that little lid that opens, and then they would get put on a belt, and then as they come off, they would go on to the sorting table, which is right here. And the sorting table had 3 people on each side of it, and they would take the pear, you know, if it was a number 1 pear, which is the best class, they would let it go through. If it was a number 2, they would put it on one belt, and it would get put in a series of belts and get filled. Another bin would fill it. And then the juice pears, they would have a box, they would put it on the floor, and then they would later get dumped into a wood bin, and they'd be taken to like Treetop or Sabroso or someplace like that. Each size has a pattern to it. And we had this still up on the wall, luckily. No one has ever taken it down. But you see the size, the box, like the 48s, for example, is 3 by 3 long, 2 by 2 wide, and 4 deep in the box. And so and there's a specific pattern to each size, and like the hundreds is, you know, 3 by 2, and then 5 by 5 long, and 4 layers deep. And they would learn the pattern to each size, and if you did it right, then the box would weigh 40 pounds. When they're stubborn, you know, you can't get them off my hand. So there's our box department. I used to work here all summer long as a kid making boxes, because you had to make a bunch of them up ahead of time for packing. Mm-hmm. And then while we were packing, we had somebody constantly making boxes and then putting it on the slide. But this is the machine we used right here. You turn it on, and then you put your box here. Actually, I'll grab a box just so you can see how it's done. You have to fold them. Then once you fold them, then you would take them and staple them.
Oh, wow.
Right there, all the way through.
You know, you always see those kinds of staples on produce boxes in grocery stores and markets and the like,
right.
But this is the machine where these actually come from.
You can see there's tape on the box right now, because they went away from the staple and they went to taping. They got machines that actually fold the tops down, and as it goes across, it puts tape.
So a box stitcher is essentially just a huge stapler.
Yeah, it's all it is. And this is copper.
And it just is fed raw copper?
Yeah. This is a 25-pound roll of copper when it's full. And of course, copper was cheap back then. So, but now this would cost a lot of money to do it this way.
Wow.
It actually feeds when you press on that pedal. It feeds the wire through here, and then this pushes it down and cuts it. And then when the prongs hit the ends, it folds it right here, and that's what makes the staple. Wow. This has done probably millions of boxes for us over the years. Yeah, I worked my youth away up here.
Yeah.
60 by 100, 6,000 square feet.
Of cold storage?
Yeah, it's cold storage, yep. It's not, the refrigerant's not on right now, but right now it's just being used as storage. So this is 2 halves. That's 3,000 square feet on each side, 16 feet high. Same thing, we keep it down to about 30 in here when we stored pears. And then we have a wall in here so that when we get our inventory down, we could actually shut one side off, and I don't have to run the whole thing. It saved a lot of money on the refrigeration.
It's basically just a huge refrigerator for storing pears and other produce.
Right, exactly. But this is our warehouse. It's 60 by 100. And it's the same size as the other one. It just doesn't have a divider wall.
Sure.
So this is not refrigeration. This is just dry storage. It has just tin. It's just metal, and then the roof is insulated though, so it stays relatively cool in here even on a hot summer day. And here's the compressors in here. It's got 2 separate compressors.
Oh, these are kind of antique looking.
Yeah, well, this one here burned out a few years ago, so that's why that one looks more modern. But yeah, these things are about $10,000 each, so it's not cheap.
So this piece of land and all this property and pear infrastructure, when you get out of the business, are you selling this land?
Well, we're going to keep this main part here. We'll probably continue to lease out the buildings for storage because, especially after the fire, there's a pretty big demand for storage. I mean, any kind of storage, really.
Yeah. Just like people's stuff?
Yeah, that stuff. And if it happens to be something that needs to be refrigerated, well, we could do that too.
Sorry.
If it's other produce from somewhere or various things.
Yeah.
So we have that capability. And then up here's, I got to show you this family heirloom up here.
Okay.
Actually, I think it might be around back. 1975 Ford F750. We bought it brand new in 1975. And we've only used it for harvest, so we put 2,000 to 3,000 miles on it every year, and it spends most of the time in the warehouse. It's all original paint and everything.
That is cool. And then your family put the Meyer Orchards?
Yeah, Meyer Orchards, Somebody painted on there. They didn't have decals back then, so.
I love the way that looks.
Yep, everything's original. Except I did go through a couple clutches because I used to load this up too much. We'd put 16 bins of pears on here, and then I used to put 20 on there, but I had to cut it down to 16 because I was doing too much damage to the vehicle. So we'd haul 32 bins at a time on one load. Wow. Which is about 30,000 pounds. They're almost 1,000 a piece. So this thing's done a lot of work for us.
I bet.
A lot of work. And we still use it. I mean, up until last harvest. I mean, and we're still going to use it. We still got to make a few more trips into town to return some empty bins. So we use it on the. We also use it to haul equipment. Like if we have to have a major repair on a tractor, that's got a tilt bed on the back, and so we could tilt that trailer bed down and then drive a forklift or a tractor or whatever you want, and just haul it into Medford and get it fixed.
Well, folks, that was a really interesting tour of this orchard. I think I just learned more about pear farming than I ever thought I would know. But with that, that's going to do it for this episode. I've been Keegan Van Hook, and this is Us As We Are. Thanks again to the Meyer family for letting us come and have a look at their orchard as part of our continuing exploration of the drought here in southern Oregon and the West at large. This is not the last story we'll be doing concerning the drought, I have no doubt. We already have one video shot and in the lineup where we go and explore the Magoo Maiden hemp farm and learn from the farmers there about how the drought is affecting them and the hemp industry. Otherwise, if you want to support this show, the best way to do that is to become a contributing member on Patreon at patreon.com/sailorboymedia. Big thanks to our current major Patreon supporters: Adam, Alex Zendejas, Amy E. Van Hook, Daniel Van Hook, Elizabeth Austin, Little Number 5, Lucas L. Bankston, Robin Josie, and T. Langdon. I also want to mention that we are still airing short versions of this type of programming on Southern Oregon PBS as part of a continuing cooperation. If you want to know more about that and watch some of the shorts we've made, go to sopbs.org/us-as-we-are. For any other information, or to contact us, go to sailorboymedia.com.